Hi, fifth graders. I'm so glad you are in my class today, and I'm so excited about the topic we get to continue to talk about. Who remembers what we've been discussing for the past week or so? Awesome, that's right. We've been talking about different types of poetry and looking at poems. So yesterday we were learning what makes up a poem. And we found out that there are several different types of poems and genres in poems. So can any of you guys name a few? Awesome, you guys are doing great. It looks like you guys are catching on wonderfully. So today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be looking at two different poems and see what comparisons we can find between them. Because each author has a different writing style does not mean it's not a poem. So what are some common components that make up a poem? If you were able to write your own poem, what would you write it about and what type of style would you use? So the two poems we are going to be looking at today are called I Wrote This Little Poem and A Riddle. So as we read those, let's make sure that we engage in writing down those things that we notice in our writer's notebook. So I want you to notice words that rhyme, figurative language, maybe a word that you don't even recognize, or something that you think is funny. I want you to just write down anything that you notice at all about those two poems and any comparisons that you can make in between them. So I'm thinking about the different styles an author can use for rhyming. I noticed that in both of these poems that every other line has a rhyming word. Can someone tell me what those two lines would be called in a rhyme? That's exactly right, a couplet. So did you see how I stopped to think about what I read? Then I reread the parts that I was thinking about. I didn't just assume that I was right because I had read it once. So, as readers and writers, we need to make sure to stop and analyze what we're reading and what we've read thus far. So now that we've read these poems together and we've talked through them and everything, I want you to go ahead and give it a try on your own. You're going to find a poem in your reading book, in a library book that you have, or off the classroom library we have set up. We have all of our poetry books out right now, so you can go and find a book on poems, and then you and your elbow partner, you will read the poem together and write down the things that you notice to make up the poem. So first, you'll read it out loud together, then I want you guys to read it separately, and then reread it and start writing down things, just so you can make sure that you're stopping and pausing and reading and taking in really what the poem is saying. Afterwards, we'll come back together and discuss a few things that we're learning, so be ready to share what you're thinking, okay? It can be, like I said, it could be rhyming words, it could be, oh, this author writes this certain way, it could be a certain type of genre, or you could have even said, oh, I chose this poem because it was this title. I want you to say something and be able to back that up. So since we all have our reading material, and now it's just time for us to get started reading. So now we're going to just dive deeper into those poems, and you guys are already doing great. So as we look into these, let's make sure that we're taking the time to read the poem, listen, and write. And so why do we listen to poems? Exactly right. We listen to poems because sometimes you can just skim over words and the rhythm and the rhyming doesn't quite make sense in our heads as it would if we're reading it out loud. And so that's the exact point of why we read out loud as well. So as you read your passage, start to also think about the theme that you'll use for your own poem. So how we're going to write our own poems today, and for this class period and the next, we're going to make blackout poems. Does anyone have any idea what that means? Okay, so let me explain just so we can make sure we're all on the right page. A blackout poem is where we are going to be taking a page from a book, a magazine, an old discarded book, and then we are going to read that page and then black out around the words to make our own poem. So obviously we don't want to go ahead and black out the whole page before we have read the whole passage just because we see 2 or 3 words that we like. No, we want to first read, then we want to think about what we want to write, maybe even write out a little rough draft off to the side saying, oh, I think I want it to be something like this, or I want mine to be on weather, so I'm going to be looking for words such as like leaves and wind and vibrant colors and things like that. I want you to read through that, underline the words with a pencil that you think you would use, make sure it forms sentences of sort or clauses, and then we'll go back with a Sharpie and mark out the words. So I hope you guys are going to enjoy doing these blackout poems with me today.